I'm not really sure what's going on with this
Okay,
at
what's
all.
up? Want to restart? Want to close the app and then restart? Close
Shut
the windows.
the windows just a smidge, just so we have the.
Watch out for your hand, okay?
Oh.
Okay, just let it go. Like, friggin' decides to like fall open.
Did that catch? For sure. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Double R Network. As always, I am your host, Rusty, and today we have Radhika. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Today's topic is kind of going to be a mismatch of a few things, but our main topic of discussion is going to be
I think there's a lot happening right now around social engineering. What do you think?
social engineering. Yeah, explain. What do you mean by that?
It's always interesting to me because I also don't quite ever put a finger on what exactly it means to be socially engineered. But I think there's just so much bombardment of information at this point, and the way we consume information has changed drastically.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of us have forgotten how to even read, or how often do we pick up a pencil and actually write, right? Or like a pen. So it's really interesting to me because a lot of this information is making a tremendous impact in our mind, but we're not consciously aware of it.
True. Very true.
So it's subtle, it's happening behind the scenes, and I consider that, I would say that would be a piece of social engineering.
So, in that sense, who do you think is behind making the decisions of where to take this?
I don't think it's one entity that's driving it. I think everybody has to kind of fall in the bandwagon of being able to create digital marketing, creating advertisements to actual campaigns around social causes that ultimately influence this whole bubble of what we call, the world we're living in, the social circle. But the way that we have been interacting, don't you think it's interesting, like how we actually make friendships or relationships is changed as well because of exactly that. We feel like we're in this pool of endless options of relationships, right? We have all these different dating apps. We have different apps to consume like different visual images, like social platforms.
Yeah.
And it's constantly like making our brain be on this very, very high stimulus driven type of environment, which was not necessarily the case. And that gives us very limited time to really think about what we want, what we are trying to do, what is our purpose. Instead, we're just kind of reacting to everything that's being fed to us.
So there's too much information coming in, and we're almost numb to our own decision making. It's just like we're on an assembly line.
Yeah, so I think because we have so much information and everybody's trying to put more information out there because they want to be seen or they want to be heard, that unless you are contributing and becoming very well prominent in that platform, you're not truly making a big impact, it feels like.
It's weird.
But that's the interesting thing though. Like, do you think that's reality? Like, do you feel like you're making an impact by just putting yourself out there versus all the other things that are stimulus around you?
I mean, I feel like I make enough impact on the things that matter around me. But I could see how you're saying like big picture stuff. I can't even make a dent in it, even if I wanted to. Yeah,
the influence it's just harder. I think people second guess that. In fact, right now there is this whole phenomenon. It's been around since 1970s, but the imposter syndrome is what they call it. It's this whole phenomenon where basically we're second guessing our contribution, our expertise, because of everything around us seems to be better or more valued.
Yeah. Well, I can also see how, like, in the wake of like internet, all the information you can find online, how a lot of that could be very confusing, and how people don't know which way to go, or which one's true, or which one's an actual fact checker, and which one's just a Twitter bot. You know what I mean? And I could totally see how that could confuse people and almost make them not know what to do or what's real anymore.
Yeah, I think the problem I have with the idea of not knowing what's happening in terms of behind the scenes, who's controlling what, is because we're constantly having to figure that out on our own, which is a good thing, but most often we don't do that. We don't end up actually questioning or thinking about it simply because we just, again, have too much to sort through.
I mean, do you think in the wake of like all these like gossip magazines or like the forums or different things like that, like people are trying to follow just anything they can?
I think we've always had gossip though. Like everybody was excited about the next tabloid, or like the human nature is to kind of, I don't know, capitalize on this whole concept of other people's problems, which is, I would say, very negative. But that's where we are today, and we can't truly completely change that. But it's all about how you drive your mind on a constant daily basis to focus on the things that better you, that perhaps goes beyond you and helps others. I guess the social engineering part is a lot of different elements have to be sorted out in your life, and you have to consciously make that effort to not become basically just another result of all this information.
So if all of this is affecting us in what feels like almost a negative way, how do we get out of it? Like how do we kind of at least control this to where it's okay for us and not I guess negatively impacting society?
Yeah, I think I'm still trying to figure that part out,
Yeah.
right? But it's a great thing to think about.
Yeah.
I actually see there are people that are actually making a big stride towards, making sure they're not just becoming, I guess, easily influenced. And I feel like those are the ones who are coming out on top. They're the ones actually setting the new standards or the new influential values of the world. And I think it takes obviously a sense of power as well as capital as well as your thoughts and intellect to push that. But where do you start? I think the start is this, just like really being self-aware, thinking about the things that we're hearing and listening, and not really getting swayed by the glossy things in life, because that's not really the reality. I mean, if you look at all these different posts like Instagram, almost everything is Photoshopped, and we talk about Photoshop for the past 10 years, how it's impacted the body image issues, the way that people are perceiving their lives to be when it's not really the reality. People are having this false idea of what life is supposed to be like, and then they have high and different expectations, which is not realistic, and it makes them depressed.
Yeah.
But I think we're all a little bit, privy to that. Like, we know that exists, but yet we still don't consciously be able to come out of it simply because of how vastly it's part of our life. So I think if you're aware of it, you slowly maybe retract from utilizing some of those platforms that constantly bombard you with that type of information. Your mind is slowly going to go back to actually reflecting and thinking, and you might actually come up with new ideas and things that are innovative, right? What about you? What do you think you do?
Well, that's kind of interesting because I kind of pride myself on being different, on doing something against the grain, and but I can totally see how people are completely susceptible to stuff like that. And I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not, because I totally am. I'll see a commercial, be like, I want some cornflakes. I'll talk to a group of people, and then they'll all have this similar outlook based off of what we perceive as our society's direction, norms, or different things like that, or what is just like assumed of society or direction of life.
It seems like you have some floodgates. Basically, you have developed a way to kind of keep out the information and you don't want to let in.
Yeah.
And you also enjoy the good stuff. Like, I mean, hey, every time you see a nice advertisement that it's playing to your passion or whatever you're trying to eat for your next meal, it's hard to resist. I get it. I definitely understand. But I guess like you seem to have a good balance. It seems like
you have to have a good balance. And the thing that I think helps that balance for me is I don't use social media as much as your average. Yeah. At least I try not to.
Definitely.
Don't have Facebook. I don't have. I barely have an Instagram. I stay away from a lot of that stuff.
How would you say your life has changed since you kind of stopped using it?
What's funny is that I've noticed myself not looking at the screen as much.
Mm-hmm.
You go out to dinner and you see like families and other people, they're all like sitting down at the table and everyone's like this, and I'm there talking to my girlfriend, seeing what's new, how work is, what we're going, and I think that has definitely helped and increased my social skills. Because if you talk to people these days, I feel like
it's a new norm. Apparently, it's not
like socially
it's not
awkward.
as
It's just like
predictable. Yeah, because everything has changed in the way that we interact. In fact, relationships, I think is so interesting because you mentioned like going to dinner and being with family or your partner, and you're so consumed in your own world of work. Maybe it's your work email coming through, but there's always that time you have to set out for the things you want. And social skills, like the whole nature of humans is about being social.
Yeah.
And we're slowly stripping that away. And I mean, it's not a far-fetched thing to say that everybody is really deciding their social circle based on a screen versus actual conversations.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, too, you notice the difference between like economic levels,
Sure,
right?
Yeah.
Like certain people, affluent people, might have fantastic social skills, have a flip phone, and not give a crap about anything else. You have other people who like all they do is stare at their phones and they make $0 all day. You know what I mean?
That's the interesting thing. Like the people that are, you ask that question, like, who do you think is kind of setting the tone here, or like what's really pushing it? And that, without getting too deep into a conspiracy hole, but like I'm definitely thinking like there are people.
Corporations, man.
I think there are people that are definitely aware of the syndrome, and they're definitely aware what it's doing to the brain and mind, and they're the ones that are coming out on top and saying, hey kids, you're not going to have iPads and YouTube hours of the day, even if it's 30 minutes, right? You're not going to have that. I remember back when I was growing up, my parents didn't even have cable TV. Like we would only have a big movie night once in a while where we would actually rent a movie and
from
watch
Blockbuster?
it. Yeah, from Blockbuster.
Yes.
And it was a very celebrated moment in our family time. So if you look now, it's so readily available. People come back home and they're just turning on that Netflix, and that's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that there has to be some sort of discipline in order to really achieve that the higher aspects of life.
There is no discipline now.
There is no discipline. Everything is so self-driven. It's like it's good to be self-driven, but it's not good to be driven by your wants and desires all the time, because then you have no control over yourself.
True. But I think the thing is there's no value in being disciplined now, or from what people see.
Yeah, I agree.
When you can get, porn at your fingertips, you can chat with anybody across the world. You can figure out any type of information thanks to Wikipedia, Google, all this other stuff. Like everything is instant now. You can date, Tinder, swipe. Like it's just quick. And patience, slowing down, and really getting to know somebody is no longer, I think, held as high as it used to be. And that's causing major problems, especially in the dating scene.
Yeah. The thing is, I think at the end of the day, I think people want to be cared and have the attention given to them. Like nobody wants to be sitting across the table having somebody else look at the phone while they're waiting for their attention. It's like the worst feeling, right?
Yeah.
I think that the value is no longer on that attention. I think the value is in just going to the next thing. So once you're sitting across the table, where am I going to go next is the thing that's on your mind. It's kind of like waiting for your turn to talk. A lot of times I've had this problem when I was kind of just starting my career. It's like, wow, I have so much things to share. I want to be the one talking at the table. But then I realized when I just shut up and listen, I really learned a great deal. And like, it wasn't always about me putting my idea on the table, because my idea completely changed after they said their idea, right? I got more of a knowledge to actually come up with new things. So the idea of always thinking of what's the next thing to do actually hinders you from your destination.
I totally see that. And yeah, I think also too, we forget that not only do we have to talk, but we have to listen, right? We have to hear other people out. And I think that also gets us down a weird rabbit hole too, because like, not only are we being bombarded, but then we're spewing out other information and bombarding other people with that, and it's just like a chain or something like that, a chain of events. But
yeah, I definitely feel like in my relationships, one thing I've learned is to listen, and it's a constant, constant work in progress.
Okay. Yeah, tell me about relationships.
Oh man, what do you want to know? I think it's a big ocean.
Okay. So guided towards kind of what we're talking about, like with the age of Tinder, social media, all this kind of stuff. How's dating? I've been out of the game for a little while.
I mean, I'm not in the game, but hey, I want to be. But I think dating has changed significantly, and especially with all the recent, movements and campaigns around the dynamic between male and female, it's becoming, I think, more challenging for people to just approach people with the goodness of like, hey, I just want to get to know you. That approach is almost out of the window. I mean, there are some corner cases, I think, that you can probably still find. I think you and we've been friends for so long, and we've definitely developed that all based on simply communication, right? There's been times where we haven't seen each other for a long time, and like the same goes for any type of relationship and dating. I think like communication is on a thin parameter at this point. I think that the values of two people must be the same, at least the foundation. I always love referring to like foundation, because that's what I kind of grew up with my family referring to as a relationship or love or anything. I mean, without going into the rabbit hole of what love is, I will say that the foundation is kind of like when you're building a house, you really want a solid ground to build on. If you build on a hollow ground, it's going to need some work later, or it might just fall through, right? So relationships is a lot like that. I think at this point, having alignment of values, like what are you really wanting out of the relationship? Because it's totally fine if you're going into a dating scene and you're like, I'm not really looking for a full monogamous relationship, right?
Yeah.
And in that case, I guess it might be okay to not have such a thorough communication path. But if you are looking for something like that, I think it's harder to get that at this point.
A truly monogamous, truly faithful relationship? Or
it's more about like what you're looking for. If you want more of a high communication, like a high touch point relationship where you're actually interacting with them on a day-to-day basis, and you're not having just a casual type of approach, I think it's harder to find that, especially with the dating scene now, because it starts off on the basis of like, hey, I'm already looking at multiple options while I'm sitting across from you.
Yeah.
It's kind of in the back of your mind. Nobody's really addressing it. It's the elephant in the room. At least that is for me.
So when like you say, for example, like people today, right? When they go on a date or they meet up with their, newly swiped match.
Yeah.
Is that what people are thinking of? Just like, all right, well, if this doesn't work out, I gotta have plan B. Move on to the next one.
Well, they do have. I'm sure they have a plan B. Or if I'm not going to be too presumptuous, I think that people are always thinking about what's next. Like I said, I've seen many times that people are trying to utilize time to their advantage. It's like, hey, fail fast type of mentality. It's like, hey, it doesn't work. Let's move on to the next, right? But is there truly always a next? I don't think people are giving enough time and effort to truly understand the scenario as well. So they're always thinking they have infinite options. And also, if you look at the dating scene now, like younger people they're still sometimes having a harder time finding a career path. They're still living with their parents, even in their kind of late 20s or early 30s. And, like people are just taking their life in a different pace, or like achieving different things at different pace versus how it was, even a couple of years back.
Yeah.
Don't you notice that? Like, in our age group, like, we're in our like mid-20s, and you look at what's happening in this generation. We see a lot of people still trying to figure out what they want to do. If they have found out what they want to do, they might be struggling to keep that alive, and their priorities have shifted to more of like me and my career and my life versus me and my partner.
I mean, I do 100% agree with that, and it's interesting that you mentioned that like there's a lack of reflection which you can learn from, you know, and if it's just a numbers game that people are trying to go through, you know, like fail fast, you know, and get that out of the way so you can move on to the, you know, what's right later on or faster than you would otherwise. If you're just playing a numbers game, you're going to run out eventually. You're going to strike out. There's going to be an empty period where nothing happens because you've exhausted all of your resources in the 50-mile radius that you selected.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
But that also brings up an interesting question too. Like, because people are living with their family longer, parents longer, that it's almost like society did like a 180. You know how like people did fewer relationships and took their time with them and really tried to make it work with that person, persistence and whatever, and they were more about moving out and finding that independence early. Where now it's, you know, go through a bunch of relationships and maybe we'll move out in 5-10 years. kind of mentality.
It's so true.
You know, where it's like, oh man, like we're gonna, you know, it's weird.
The urgency is just not as prominent.
Yeah.
I think the urgency is the best way to explain my sentiment or what I see as something that could be more of. I want in my life to be, you know, whatever I truly want, whatever, you know, anybody really wants, they're going to want it as soon as possible, or they're going to work as hard as they can to make sure they preserve that in their life, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole idea of having a goal, having a dream. You're really chasing after it. And sometimes, you know, you don't have a way or a path, but you create it. You have to make that your ambition, your goal. And it's the same for relationships. Like, if you really want something to work, you have to put in that time and energy. I mean, we've all been there. There's been like difficult times in our families where it seems extremely hard. Things are falling apart left and right, but you really stick through it. And there's just a lot of power in that. And you can't have that if you don't have the urgency to react towards it. Like, if things are falling apart and you just sit back and you watch it happen, it's going to just fall apart. It's not going to build itself back up. The urgency needs to be there and like kind of like, hey, let's pick up the pieces. Let's get things together. And let's say if you want to move out, you have to like figure out a plan and make that plan into action. Yeah. The plan to action part is very difficult for a lot of us these days. Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's being taught anymore. I don't think we're being grown or raised not necessarily the right way, but like for lack of better words, like we are being babied and celebrated for being alive. Right? We get trophies for showing up to games in Little League. We get a pat on the back even though we didn't graduate high school. You know,
tough love is a really good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I strongly believe in that. You know, you gotta, you know.
I think we, you know, Greg, you and I have, you know, the Asian culture has a lot of that, and I actually really think it's a great thing. If you look at the Asian culture, specifically because we have that in our background, I know I can speak from experience that the tough love was all I saw kind of in some of my founding childhood years, and it wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't like a negative where it's just only anger and like the parents are just beating you up. I think a lot of people could perceive it that way, but it wasn't like that. But it made us stronger individuals and really, really set the tone as, look, nothing is going to be granted. Like it's not like you can't take anything for granted.
Yeah. And I mean, even if my parents had something, they made me work for it.
Oh yeah.
You know,
they would not let that.
Yeah, I mean, I paid for college. You know, I did other things myself. I paid for the cars that I've had.
Exactly.
And
how does that make you feel? Like, how do you feel now looking back? At that point, you were probably like, yeah, I have really a lot on my plate.
I was pissed off at the time, honestly. You know,
exactly.
I mean, I was kind of, I wanted to be that spoiled little shit. You know what I mean? I wanted, you know, everything to be given to me. I wanted.
Everybody does.
Yeah, you know, but I mean, I wouldn't want to drain my parents to, you know, get some type of, I don't know, materialistic lifestyle.
Yeah.
If I was going to go down that route, I would have to do it myself.
Exactly.
You know? And I think they kind of instilled a almost self-reliant, individualistic type of mentality that I need to provide for myself. Or eventually, I need to provide for my family. And I think that, in a lot of ways, is a purpose for me, and I feel like a lot of people are lacking that purpose these days. And that kind of helps me see the light at the end of the tunnel to achieve certain goals, to go a certain way. And I think if you're just whimsical and like, oh no, I can live with mom and dad's, and oh no, I'll just swipe another chick, it's all good. You lose that sense of urgency. You lose that sense of independence. You're becoming more reliant on technology or others around you to live.
Man, I can relate to that so much. Like that's exactly the tone that was in my family growing up. Yeah. Very similar, and it made a big difference. And I think people always tell my parents like, wow, my sister and I, we're very similar in our approach to life in terms of obviously the goals that we have and what we want to do and create an impact. But my parents are always ask this question like, how did you do this? Like, how did you raise these two daughters that are having these characteristics? And it's always funny for me because like they literally, it was a trial and error for them too. Like they were like, I saw them constantly having to deal with the tantrums and like, we were resistant as a wall. Like we had some hard times. I remember like I was definitely a stubborn kid, and I think I still am stubborn a little bit especially when I'm around my parents. And the arrogance and the stubborn mixed together along with what they really really forced and instilled in both of us made us who we are today. And I'm so grateful for that. That's the biggest gift that I think an individual can instill and give purpose to another person. And I think that makes all the difference. So when we look around and think like, oh, they're lacking this, maybe that's what's missing. I mean, you can't really go and probably analyze everything, but that's something those folks have to kind of instill now and kind of play catch up.
Yeah.
If anything.
Well, that's the other thing too. It gets harder as you get older, right? Same with like learning a foreign language. Before the age of 13, your brain can absorb so much information a lot better. Mm-hmm. So as you get older, having to reteach yourself some of the things like independence is could be difficult. A girlfriend's friend, she was in the foster system for a little while, and she likes to use that as an excuse to not learn from her mistakes, to not progress in life. Yeah. And I feel like maybe not specifically zoning in or honing in on that topic. I think a lot of people use different excuses now to justify laziness, lack of whatever it may be that they are. I feel like it's becoming an excuse age.
Yeah, I just don't understand when you do have that excuse. Yeah. How do you get by in life? Like, what exactly are you going to be doing though? Like, I can't imagine not, working in my life and just taking the backseat and kind of waiting for opportunities to come to me, because I would just feel like it's just so foreign to me. Mm-hmm. But like you said, it's not the case for everybody else. Like somebody else might be feeling like it's foreign to me to even try to find that opportunity. Opportunity will just land on my lap and I'll go for it when it does. Mm-hmm. Very distinct, ways of living. Mm-hmm. So when you don't and you take the backseat, I always wonder, like, what is it? What is it that they're finding gratification from? Because everybody wants to feel a sense of purpose. Like, where is that purpose coming from for that person?
Well, I think, like we were talking about earlier, the divide is bigger than ever before, right? And so, I mean, you have people who have this extreme drive, who are just like purpose built. They are going like succeed, move on to the next project, complete, move on to that, like let's get it done. And other people who are so bombarded with everything that they become lazy, that the bombardment with information is there.
I think they get stuck in a rut. Like sometimes I've heard a lot of people that are close to me that are struggling. Sometimes they mention the word I'm confused, I'm lost, and I don't know what's the path I should take. But you have to start somewhere. It could be the start that doesn't lead to the place you wanted as your destination, but it definitely will help you rule out that one from the list so you could go to the next thing. That's the way my brain would process that. Like, there is multiple opportunities in life where you feel stuck and you don't know which path to take, but you have to start on a path to know that's probably not the path you want to take, or it is the path you want to take. So it's so interesting. I think I find purpose from that. Purpose from actually doing than just sitting back. But a lot of times the confusion and being lost is almost like a state of mind. It's like a lot of people battle with anxiety and depression, which are very serious parts of our, it's a mental illness that we basically have to fight ourselves, just like any physical illness.
Yeah.
But I would say the state of confusion and being lost is almost comparable, because these people genuinely want to get somewhere. I feel.
Yeah.
They have all the desire to have purpose, but they can't.
I mean, I think I completely agree with what you're saying. Something that's kind of interesting too is loneliness, right? Loneliness for people is bad news. That's why you don't put people in a solitary confinement for long periods of time. That's where, no, I'm wrapping it up. That's why we don't do certain things, right? And I think the loneliness, because we're just sitting in front of a TV or on our phones or whatever it may be by ourselves, we feel isolated.
Yeah.
And that leads to the depression. That leads to lack of purpose. That leads to being easily bombarded and susceptible to advertisements and marketing. And it's just a vicious cycle that we're spiraling deeper and deeper into the wormhole.
Yeah, I really want to get into that in our next episode, because loneliness, I really cannot agree more. That's such a, even if you're the most successful doing all like that's actually something I could relate to very well, because you can have all the success, you can always be very driven, but at the end of the day, you're coming home to yourself and your conscience. And humans, like we said, are social beings, and loneliness could be even in a room full of people. It could be a room full of people that you just simply don't connect with, and that could create this void in your mind. But yeah, I would love to talk about that next time.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's do it.
Well, Radhika, it has been an absolute pleasure for you to be on. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Bye.